These days, owning a home feels like chasing a mirage. In April 2025, the average price of a house in Ontario was $859,645. The carrying costs of that average home now consumes approximately 58% of a median Canadian income, almost double what's considered affordable. So, how did we end up in a world where home ownership feels out of reach for so many? And more importantly, is there a way out of this housing crunch? One of the biggest issues? There just aren't enough houses on the market, period.
One of the important things to remember is that in any given year, we've built almost all of the housing that exists already, right? We only build about 1 or 2% of the new market every single year.
That extra 1 to 2% of homes being built, it's nowhere near enough to keep up with demand. Canada would need to build approximately 181,000 homes per year on top of what's already in the works, just to meet the needs of Canadians looking for a place to call home.
One of the statistics that is wild and that people really do not believe if you tell it to them for the first time is that Canada is building less new housing today than it did in the 1970s, before I was born. All of our housing problems are really just downstream of that fact. We do not build enough homes for the large and growing population we have.
And that's where the affordability crisis kicks in. With so few homes available, prices have skyrocketed, whether you're trying to rent or buy. Over half of renters and homeowners are worried about keeping up with their rent or mortgage. And 10% of Canadians don't even have housing that's affordable, in decent shape, or big enough for their families. So what are our politicians saying about this housing shortage?
We're ready to partner and let's get them built and get housing affordable.
Friends, it's about supply and demand.
No, I think that we need to deliver more supply, make sure the market is stable. It's a huge part of our economy.
I want house prices to be more affordable for Canadians.
Let's hit pause for a quick Econ 101 refresher. When demand is high, prices go up, like we're seeing with houses. Normally that would push suppliers to build more homes to meet demand. But here's the catch. The homes just aren't being built fast enough. So what's causing this supply problem?
There's a number of culprits. One is that it has just become harder to build new homes. The regulatory environment, right, like city councils have adopted more stringent rules to build new homes. When we talk about new construction, as I say, there are land costs, labor costs, material costs. Those then all have to go through the gate of things like approvals. How long does it take to get a project from some developer's brain to an actual physical home that exists in the world that somebody can take a key for? More and more of the new homes that we've been adding to the market have been condo towers, and those take longer to approve. It's not unusual to see approval timelines of 5 to 10 years in some cases.
Sure, there are supply issues driving up prices, but that's not the whole story. A huge chunk of the cost comes from the value of the land the house is built on.
What we often forget is that the physical structure of a house deteriorates over time. So when we talk about housing prices going up, what is actually gaining value over time is the piece of land under the house. The problem is a lot of people know that, and a lot of people will invest on land expecting high returns on land.
The short version is that the land is worth what you can do with it. There's been many decades of policy that have really limited where you can build, even the new housing that we do allow. And so that also makes that land scarce and therefore more expensive.
When land is zoned for residential use, it naturally gets more competitive, and that drives the price up. Then there's the classic location factor. How close is it to transit, parks, jobs, groceries? Do you like the neighborhood? How big of a house do you want? All of these things affect the value of the land. Plus, don't forget about the infrastructure costs, like hooking up power, sewers, water, and the internet. Those expenses add up and make the building on that land even more expensive.
We need to build more homes.
If you listen to politicians, the answer seems simple. Just build, build, build.
We need, as a government in Ottawa, to be delivering and making sure we're building enough supply.
We're going to build homes, single dwelling homes, town homes. That's what we're going to focus on.
Once we increase, as a country, the rate of home building, then that is going to make home prices much lower than they otherwise would be.
Can we solve the affordability crisis just by building houses?
I think this just gets into how confused governments are about what will and will not work to make homes more affordable. Remember that we said, 98 times out of 100, Anybody who is looking to buy a home today is going to be looking at an existing unit. You just cannot solve the problem of housing affordability unless you are going to address the cost of existing units.
The biggest lie Canadians are told every day is that if we just build a lot of housing, prices will eventually stabilize or even drop. And that's based on a very simplistic argument that we have more people chasing houses than houses. So that if we just build more housing, we're gonna bring a certain equilibrium to that equation and everyone's gonna live happily ever after.
You can't really slice up the market and say, well, we're gonna keep the price of existing homes high while we somehow deliver a bunch of cheap homes in the new market. It's just not gonna work that way.
Up to now, we've talked about major reasons why housing is so expensive, like limited supply, regulations, infrastructure costs, the kinds of homes available, and land prices. But there's one more factor we haven't touched on yet. You see, housing these days is often treated like an investment, something to buy and sell for profit, rather than a basic human right or a place to call home. This is what's known as the financialization of housing.
It's not only people chasing housing, more and more we have money chasing housing, and a lot of money. We're talking about large corporations, pension funds, land speculators, and more even first-time home buyers. All of that adds to a lot of money chasing a limited number of housing. Traditionally in Canada, we have relied heavily on the private sector to build and deliver housing. And only a small part of housing in Canada has ever been directly developed by governments or by non-market providers. 4% of all housing in Canada, it's not for profit. And the problem with that is that when you rely on private developers and private landlords to develop, build, and deliver housing, they will do it for profit. And not only for any margin of profit, they will always trying to maximize how much profit they can make. That's what businesses do.
If you're trying to buy a home, you're not just competing with other buyers. You're also going head to head with investors, big pension funds, and corporate landlords. That means way more competition for the same limited number of homes. And while house prices and rent have fallen recently, that's just a drop in the bucket compared to the years of relentless increases. Check out this graph showing federally assisted affordable housing in the 70s and 80s compared to the mid-90s and 2000s. See that massive dip? That's the gap in affordable housing we're still trying to make up for today.
You know, housing is not like other goods, right? If I don't own a car, me not owning a car doesn't really affect other people. If I don't have a house that is sufficient for what my family needs, the government can take my kid away. Housing is absolutely vital to people's lives. We talk about housing as a human right. However you want to define affordability or guaranteed rights, there's absolutely a case for government intervention.
Given all the challenges we've just talked about, it seems like an easy political win for governments to step up and fund new affordable housing, right?
Affordable housing is not always as politically easy and popular as you might imagine it is.
With that being said, is there something else we can do?
One thing they could start doing is actually just start talking down the market. It's unpopular and I don't actually expect them to do it, but one of the biggest signals that the market would be looking for from the government is the current policy of keeping home prices stable, is that going to continue? So long as the government says it is, a lot of buyers and sellers are going to pay what they expect the market to support.